Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jayakula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. Please suggest a topic for a short Dharma talk.
Will you talk about judgment?
Judgment days are coming. The most important thing is to be able to discriminate between judgment and discernment. Discernment, absolute clear seeing, is a quality of this alive aware reality that we have embodied more or less. So we have more or less clarity or more or less confusion or cloudiness in our discriminating between what's helpful for us, what's not helpful for us, who is helpful to hang out with, who isn't, what circumstances are helpful, what are not. Mm-hmm. Those kinds of discriminations or discernments are all functional. They have absolutely no moral or ethical judgment attached to them whatsoever, if we're talking about this tradition. Other traditions might be different. Everything in this tradition is done from a functional perspective of what is going to help us relax and open our senses and discover who we really are and what is actually going on here. So every choice that we make, if we're being practitioners, is about that. We're making functional decisions, and to do that, we need a lot of clear seeing. What gets in the way of our clear seeing, of course, is compulsive patterns. So they have energy, and that's when we have a clear perception, and then we start second-guessing ourselves and worrying about it and get into a muddle. And then, of course, I've talked many times about, especially for women, how having clear seeing and simply acting on it is often criticized. So you'll hear women claiming they're confused when they're actually not, so as not to be criticized for being clear, or being clear and then coming up with a whole lot of excess stuff around why they think that and why it's okay and why no one should be mad about it. So judgment, usually we're saying something is right or wrong in some kind of absolute way, or we're saying that someone is good or bad in some particular way, or we're saying things about others or thinking or feeling things about others that cause more separation. So I can use my clear seeing and my discernment to say that somebody's behavior is harmful, or if someone's really violent, that someone should be separated so they don't hurt people. But I don't have to condemn the person. And in this tradition, God, aka this alive aware reality, is not punishing. So in this tradition, there's no concept of sin. And ultimately, there's no concept of right versus wrong. There is only goodness without a second. Again, there's functional decisions that we make. It's not like anything goes. But those decisions are not based on some absolutist or dogmatic moralism or ethics, because everything here is made of that one subjectivity, that one alive awareness. So anything that's happening is that playing at whatever's happening. There's no actual judgment to be made. We only make judgments out of a feeling of separation and all the vulnerability that comes with. For instance, a very common thing that happens is people feel badly about themselves, and so they want other people to also feel badly about themselves. Or they feel threatened in some way, and so they separate off into clumps based on whatever, a neighborhood, a family, some sort of identity of some sort, and they clump together and then criticize and judge everybody else. That's based on that fundamental sense of separation and threat. If we don't feel separate from anything, then there's not really any threat. And one of the bitter medicines, as Lakshmanji puts it, of waking up and discovering that all of the little pleasures you got judging other people and stomping around and complaining about how other people are wrong or bad in this way that's not functional, in this way that's more about self-definition. You're defining yourself against other people. That's a bitter medicine to understand that all of those judgments are relative. Even the most standard accepted judgments of the Abrahamic traditions, that someone who murders someone else is a bad person, or that evil exists, or that punishment is deserved. It's a bitter medicine for some people to wake up enough to recognize that none of these things hold water with God. I always like to use the example of punishment because I think it's relatively easy, if you have a certain amount of open-heartedness, to achieve distance from the idea that we should be punishing each other. And again, it's not to say that some people don't need to be separated because they're harmful, but this idea of punishment, who do we think we are really going around punishing people? What is punishment really? What are we actually punishing? We're punishing someone for being limited. We're punishing someone for being in pain. We're punishing someone for responding to an environment that they have no control over. And even in ordinary terms, without any spiritual tradition attached to it, the idea of punishment makes no sense whatsoever. It is really a religious idea that has infected secular society, that we have a right to punish people for their wrongdoings, or that it's even any kind of a solution. I don't know that even that many people think it's a solution. They just think you did something wrong. You deserve punishment. What does that mean? People who get to the point where they've done something that would garner punishment have already been punished by whatever conditions they were in that led to that moment. What people need is reintegration. They need inclusion. They need love. They need to feel valued. Punishment is absolutely counterproductive for anything we might want for humane society. So I think it's easy to kind of grok that on some level, but it's harder to let go of our feelings like someone else is wrong or bad or maybe even evil. I've even heard people in yoga communities, someone does something wrong and they talk about that person as evil and they feel so put upon by whatever somebody did, stole something or misbehaved in some way. And I feel like, what tradition are you in that you would accuse someone else of being evil if there's only one self here? You don't need even any religious tradition to just open your heart and realize that people are not evil. They're just responding to things. So we have to give up our judgments. And that's very bitter medicine because we enjoy our judgments. Just on an energetic level, we enjoy stomping around and judging other people. But we also enjoy the sense of security that judging other people gives us, the sense of rightness. And there's no one who's a more harsh judge than those who are harshly judging themselves, because that is so painful that it often gets pushed off onto other people. There's no one who's more angry and hating of others than those who are angry and hating of themselves. Justice is secondary to recognizing the intrinsic value of everyone. So justice is something that we have to consider and enact and embody when we don't have an innate feeling for the intrinsic value of everything. If we were just in general more awake and more in touch with that indestructible value of everything and everyone, we would naturally care for each other. We would naturally feel devotion toward each other. And 99% of those situations would never arise because people would feel cared for and valued. And most of those situations of crime arise from people literally not being cared for or valued, not having a foundation for life that allows them to feel like they have a place. So given that we don't have that situation, we don't have a situation where everyone is intrinsically valued, we need justice. Justice is a relative thing. And yeah, this tradition is, at least on paper, committed to equality and equal participation, whether that was actually embodied by the ancient practitioners. But at least in the scriptures, it says that. So we have a chance where we can better embody that. But I think that as a spiritual community, it really boils down to actually doing the work where you actually feel the value of everyone. Because our community is involved in an initiative to become better able to create a welcoming environment for people with different identities, as we call them these days, right? We are actually trying to do the real work of going in there, opening our hearts and finding those pathways to actually caring, actually welcoming, actually loving, actually valuing. As humans, we're going to do that in a stumbly way because, we're all mixed bags. But that is the job of a spiritual community, is to do that. And along the way, we can use the tools that are more within the umbrella of justice. But that isn't enough, I don't think. I don't think that actually does the trick.
Do you have a specific love practice?
Everything we do is about that. This tradition is very focused on the heart. It's really similar to other traditions. It's very similar to Dzogchen, if you've heard of that, but it's more focused, for instance, on kriyas of the heart, doing various kriya yoga practices that relate to the heart and doing other kinds of meditations that relate to the heart. There's other things going on too. It's not all about that, but that is kind of its most unique characteristic in terms of the actual practices that we do. This tradition is called Trika Shaivism or Kashmir Shaivism. It's also, there's a lot of very intellectual sounding books associated with this tradition, but there's also just gorgeous devotional poetry and devotional writings. It really is more focused on that. And the other thing about this tradition is something we don't have is this idea that we're faking it till we make it, or we're cultivating like compassion or cultivating something. We have more the idea that we're just being ourselves and we're trying to really get to those things like compassion, which don't belong to us, which are aspects of reality itself. And just clearing the way enough so that those natural virtues like compassion and kindness can just manifest in us naturally without effort. So we actually never have any reason for judging anyone in the way that I was talking about earlier, other than our own feeling of separation. There is no other reason. Nobody ever deserves it. It's never appropriate. There's never an okay reason, although we do it because we still experience separation. So neither should we flagellate ourselves, but just to understand that it is never warranted, ever. You're basically God judging God, which makes no sense. We should always be modest in our goals of what we can do. Because when we're not, when we have grand goals, like I want to solve homelessness, then we don't do anything because it's too big. And then we feel like crap. Mm-hmm. So you could give money, or you could be sweet and loving to homeless people that you meet. You could work in a nonprofit that works on homelessness if you really want to do something big. But even that is a small drop in the bucket. I used to work in housing and homelessness when I lived in the Bay Area before. And there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people working on housing and homelessness in the Bay Area. And I'm sure there's just as many now, if not more. And we still have a housing crisis, and the numbers of homeless people on the street are worse. So we should do things because we want to. But as the Bhagavad Gita says, we have to let go of the result. attachment to the result is where suffering is. I'll tell you that the older I get, the more I feel content just being able to be kind to random people I meet. Today, I was thinking about that again, because our community's been talking a lot about identity-based violence and how we can relate to that better, be more welcoming and more nuanced. And I had been saying that it's most important to be loving and kind. We can have all these fancy ways of learning about things, but it's most important to be loving and kind in a real way. And I'm always struck by how that is so appreciated by people who have experienced a lot of identity-based violence. We often think we have to do some giant thing, but really all we need to do is be loving and kind. At the end of the day, we do have to educate ourselves because we have to understand our own experience and other people's experiences better. We have to be more empathetic. We have to understand the specificity of people's experience so that we can make better discernments about how to relate to people. But at the end of the day, it's about kindness. At the end of the day, it's about genuine valuing of people, genuine expressions of kindness and love, more than anything else. And I've just found this consistently after pretty much a lifetime of working in social justice. And there's a lot of structural things that need to happen. But when we're talking about on a day-to-day level, we need to get beyond fear. We need to get beyond everything and just be able to genuinely, spontaneously open our hearts to people. Rejection and acceptance are relative experiences. They have to do with your experience of separation, as if you could be rejected or as if you could be accepted. The fact of the matter is that you are already always included. You are already always accepted. You are already always never rejected. You were born in this body. You were born in this realm. You belong here 100%, same as everybody else. And you are 100% included already. The inner feeling of, this is my world. I was put here in this reality, and I belong here always, without question. And I'm just as valuable as anything or anyone else. That's where we want to find our refuge. The most important thing, again, is that we become genuinely kind, genuinely able to connect to other people, genuinely seeing the unique dimension of other people, genuinely getting our heads out of our butts. Genuinely becoming other-focused, not self-focused. So these are the important things. However you get there, I don't care. To me, the whole exercise of the community or the project that we're embarking on is really about another vector for genuinely seeing other people and learning how to really care for people. Just like anything else we do. It's not a standalone thing. It's not like a special thing. It's just another way to do that. And I don't really care how anyone does it, but that's what this is about. Becoming less self-concerned. Because the self that we're concerned about is very limited. Less self-concerned, more big S self-curious. The hothouse of self-concern at this particular period in history, in this particular country, in this particular kind of group, it's just suffocating. It's suffocating you all. This has been a recent experience of mine, not here, but somewhere else. Sitting in a room of white people anxietizing about their privilege. I'm sorry, but that's just like another version of centering themselves. Yeah. And it's just so self-focused. It's like, yeah, you want to notice things, but then, move on. Yeah. Like, start treating people better. Stop whining. It's like the same thing that our culture teaches us to do, which is like our problems are our social currency. Yeah. Our deficits are our social currency. And the same thing's being done with privilege. It's so heavy, and the energy is not getting out to anyone to make any connection, really. basically, privilege makes us mistreat people and not understand people and not understand the impact of our behavior and words on people, and therefore reduces intimacy with people. And as I've said a lot of times in Satsang, it is just such a relief to love everyone, regardless of what condition they're in. It feels energizing and good to be angry on some level, but it doesn't feel nearly as good as being able to love everyone.